Conversations with leading experts in enterprise resource planning. Evolving ERP. Powered by Insight Jam.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Evolving ERP. Once again, I'm your host, Ryan Daly, and returning to the show is our returning champion, Dan Aldridge. Welcome back, Dan. And you brought a friend.
Thanks, Ryan.
You brought another friend.
I brought another friend.
Luis Avila. Luis, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm really looking forward to an entertaining and insightful discussion today.
Excellent. Well, that's half on you and half on Dan. But talking to you guys before the show, I've no doubt that's going to happen. You guys recently were part of on our sister channel, the Solutions Review channel, part of a demonstration talk over there, all about ERP in the aerospace and defense arenas. But Luis, since it's your first time on this show, Evolving ERP, if you could give our viewers a little bit about yourself, what got you into ERP? What's your vector on the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for this opportunity. So my name is Luis Avila. I started in aerospace and defense about 20 years ago. So now I'm dating myself. But I started in industry, held different positions in the office of the CFO, and then spent most of my advisory or consulting career at a Big Four, where I helped aerospace and defense companies with risk consulting matters or compliance matters, with DFARS, ITAR, CMMC, etc. And also with the deal life cycle, going from deal thesis to due diligence and then post-merger integration, which led to both the development of strategies and the transformation and technology enablement of their organizations to succeed in this highly regulated and complex environment. I would also like to take just 1 minute to introduce BDO for those that are not as acquainted with our firm. So BDO is the 5th largest global audit, tax, and advisory firm with $15 billion in revenue globally in over 160 countries in over 120,000 professionals. As a global business advisor, we deliver strategic insights and hands-on implementation support through a comprehensive array of management, consulting, and advisory services, as well as tax and assurance services. We ultimately help business leaders anticipate and respond to challenges, uncover new opportunities, and adapt to a constantly changing business environment. So as you can see, I've spent my entire career in aerospace and defense. I'm very passionate about it. And I think technology in general, business transformation is an exciting place to be, especially at this moment where we have a couple of different themes and headwinds as well as tailwinds that are really propelling this industry to the next level. But I won't go any further as I don't want to steal Dan's thunder, and I know we have a couple of topics that we're sure going to cover in the next few minutes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Love the headwinds and tailwinds there. Very, very apropos phrasing. And Dan, I know from your previous appearances on the show, Boeing often comes up from your experience with Bond. So I'm excited to hear a little bit, maybe dig into more of that angle from where you're coming from. I know it's so near and dear to your heart, so I'm sure you're going to speak passionately on it. So I'm going to get out of the way, but before I do, if you're watching the show here, it is YouTube after all, so go down and come on, like and subscribe, hit those quick buttons, and then listen to Dan and Luis take it away and talk aerospace and defense in ERP.
Absolutely perfect, Luis. Great introduction of what BDO does as well as what you do and your background. I have a very similar background, as you know, in manufacturing, not necessarily specifically A&D, but in manufacturing in general. And I come at it from kind of more of the product side. And so my company, PCG, is working closely with BDO on this aerospace and defense product that we have. So I'm just coming more from the product perspective, but I am an experienced consultant. I actually got my start in, and for many years, probably 15 years or so, I was a finance consultant specifically for ERP. So I put in the predecessor of this cloud-based system that we have today for the aerospace and defense industry. So so we both have that manufacturing background. We both have that passion. That's really um, insane, the way we go after these kind of projects, and how we want to win these projects together, and do these projects together. So just hearkening back to the webinar that we had together. Now we got a little bit more time, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of speak a little bit about what are the top issues facing A&D manufacturers today, and also how ERP systems can help.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk first about this change or shift in policy acquisition. We've all seen a rapid evolution from a FAR 15 negotiated um, type of procurement to an emphasis on FAR Part 12 commercial based acquisition, to a certain extent mirroring the technology sector and how fast it moves in terms of both creating products, creating services, creating solutions, and deploying those to the market, right? And engaging with clients on um, a value-based approach. You want this outcome here. We have this solution for you, instead of let's theorize what could potentially be the outcome or outputs, not really outcome, but outputs. And let's do a time and materials, let's do a cost reimbursable project in order to see if we get to that point, that output, right? Or with the idea that you'll get to that output. So is that change of mentality that let's be more agile? We need to catch up and maintain our competitive advantage worldwide. So it is a shift in what we've been accustomed to in the aerospace and defense industry. Now, how can technology help? I mean, there are many different ways in which technology can help. One that comes to mind right away, we're talking about contracting. So, what about your contract life cycle management? Have you looked into your contract life cycle management lately, and how is it serving those that are both in your, sell side contracts as well as your buy side contracts, and that feeds into your procurement, right? So, there are many really great solutions out there that are already embedding innovation. I'm talking about generative AI, which I hope we talk a little bit more later on.
Yep,
But
definitely.
there are a lot of possibilities. When we think about contracts, we think about very wordy documents and files, and large language models was built and created specifically for that use, right? So I think there is a big opportunity for government contractors, aerospace and defense companies, to maintain their competitive advantage by leveraging that technology, making their teams more agile. Um, there's also the concept of bandwidth, and I'm gonna kind of pull from the whole innovation perspective. There, there's so much time in the day. There's 8 hours in the day or work day, um, and individuals just do not have, or employees do not have enough time to get through all of these contracts, get through all of these procurements. And generative AI is increasing that bandwidth. There was um, a fear at the beginning when generative AI was introduced to the industry that it was going to take over jobs. And what we're seeing more is a trend of generative AI allowing individuals to have more human interactions. So you may ask yourself, what, Louise,
It's
that doesn't
counterintuitive, though,
yeah,
in a
what
way.
are you talking about? Well, I was at a conference just a few weeks ago, and I was talking to procurement professionals, and they were saying, now that we have the systems that are able to make our jobs easier and get results faster, we have this bandwidth, and we are utilizing that bandwidth by going to our suppliers, talking to them, kind of the old way, right? Before COVID, when we used to have that human interaction, we used to be able to go and understand what type of supply chain issues they had. We were able to go and visually inspect widgets and have an idea of what the inventory pipeline is looking like, and where do you need more suppliers, or perhaps where do you need to amplify your supplier base, right? So counterintuitively, generative AI is creating that bandwidth for individuals to have more human interaction. And the last point I want to bring is security. I mean, we have seen this trend of cybersecurity attacks, non-conforming items, counterfeit electronic parts for a very long time. And we have, for those that have been in this industry for at least 15 years, you've heard about CMMC. You know, we've gone through this long journey, but we needed to have that journey in order to realize what is necessary for defense industrial base. And we've gone from CMMC 1.0, where we've gone from 5 levels down to 3 levels. Now that it's here to stay, now that it is a rule, the biggest benefit it has given to the industry is standardization. Apart from security, obviously, security comes with CMMC 2.0, but standardization. And why is that so important? Well, when 10 years ago, when we didn't know where CMMC was going to end up, a lot of companies underinvested and overinvested. We had both sides because nobody really knew exactly which way we were going to end up, and there was not enough clarity. Now that we have clarity, now that you're able to see what the road is, you're able to plan adequately to get to that end objective. If you're going for a CMMC level 2, you're going for a CMMC level 3, now you know what the end result should look like, and therefore establish the operational and tactical activities that need to take place. You can look at your plan of action and milestones and get to remediation so you can achieve that end objective.
Want more Insight Jam? Subscribe to our YouTube channel for shorts, panels, podcasts, and more. In your shorts feed, enjoy a daily dose of best practices from tech experts and leading solution providers, while long-form panel discussions and keynotes, recorded live every quarter, go deep on important industry topics. And don't miss our collection of regular podcasts, keeping you informed on the latest trends. We're hard at work collecting the best enterprise technology information from around the globe, so subscribe to be notified of our next upload. Now, let's get back to the show.
You're actually bringing up an issue. Of course, it's big for commercial as well, right? Because in some ways, the government is out in front with the regulations and setting the standard for, as you say, standardization. But it's also the security that a private company needs, or a publicly held company needs the same sort of security. Maybe not up to the same level where you need a GovCloud or something like that, right? But this is still a huge issue for them. And also an issue that's in commercial as well as government contractors is the issue of what do you do with AI projects that are kind of standalone projects. Let's say you have an on-premises system, an ERP system, CRM, whatever the case may be, right? It's on-premise. In order to do an AI standalone project is A, very dangerous, B, takes up a lot of bandwidth, C is a lot of energy costs, and or D, you don't get a chance to do upgrades of your core systems, right? Because you're substituting an AI project. Now, I think we were talking before, and you gave me a statistic that just blew me away, that 80% of standalone AI projects fail. That to me is just it's a horribly risky proposition, it seems, to do that. And my bias, of course, I'm an ERP guy, right? So my bias is to work on your core systems and upgrade your core systems, and that means in a lot of cases going to the cloud. Some cases it may mean applying microservices on top of an on-prem system. whatever the case may be, but modernizing and upgrading your core ERP systems, right? Or any kinds of systems anyway to the cloud. In so doing, you take advantage of you take advantage of AI that's generative AI that's built in. So there are many, many use cases you can get. And pick your package. There's many use cases you can get now of AI, generative AI built into these core systems. So my bias is to take care of that first. And I think it's a commercial issue as well as a government issue, as well as a government contract issue, those two things.
You very well laid down some of very interesting topics that we need to address with AI. So a couple of complementary thoughts here. One is, if you look at the history of ERPs, ERPs have been thought of as pillars of information, right? You got procurement information, you have accounts receivable, you have accounts payable, you have supply chain, etc. You have all sorts of pillars and of information, and basically what how users have interacted with ERPs is, I get a report out of one of those pillars, and I need to apply my experience in order to know which other pillars may give me a complementary set of information that, combined with the first pillar, I'm able to make business decisions, right?
Right.
So AI is, think of it as, it's weaving all those pillars and providing a perspective that takes into consideration many different sets of information across the organization. And that's why that concept is what's saving people time. You're saving time because generative AI is jump starting the thought process of, I need to bring data from here and I need to bring data from here. This gives me a good a good point of reference, and I can now suggest the user, would you like to take this action, or this action? So it is jump starting also the educational process, right? You can have younger employees who have perhaps has they have not had the experience to make those connections yet, but generative AI is hinting to them, hey, you may want to consider these connections, because that's exactly, at the end of the day, what it means to say business leaders need the confidence to make informed decisions. These informed decisions comes from that weaving of information. The other thought I want to, or the other fact really I want to bring up is, I've been getting a lot of questions about, well, is AI available in the Golf Cloud? As we all know, most government contractors or aerospace and defense companies that engage with the federal government their ERP systems are hosted in the
On-prem.
right. Well, on-prem or in the Golf
Hosted cloud.
right?
Yes.
From a SaaS product perspective. So AI capabilities are currently being assessed, and the environment needs to be FedRAMP certified. Now, this is going to take some time, and probably it varies from vendors to vendors, whether it's Microsoft or AWS and different products. So an important question for everyone that's listening here is to ask your vendor provider, when are these capabilities going to be available in the Golf Cloud? What's your roadmap, right? What is going to be available first, available later? Because there may be a phased out rollout. You may start with large language models and then end up all the way with agentic AI, right? So it is important to understand how your vendor and their timeline is going to be for these particular very important and strong features.
Yeah, the roadmap for sure.
Exactly. The last point I do want to bring up, and this is going back to your comment about the statistics. So there was a Harvard Business Review study very recently that said that 80% of all AI projects fail. And probably some of the folks that are listening to this if they've already tried to implement AI in their organization, they're like, yep, that's about right. But that's not the important part. The important part is why. Why are they failing? So one is that unlike the standard IT project where you have an output in mind, you say, I'm going to code my software to take this action, then this action, then this action, output. Large language models don't work that way. Large language models are trained in, you develop a platform that may be used by different individuals, and they all may use it very differently. For example, ChatGPT, if I bet most individuals have already at least, played around with ChatGPT. Some folks are using it instead of using Google search, right? That just become their search tool. Others others use it to compare products. Hey, tell me what are the differences between A and B product, whether it's for business purposes or personal purposes. And other organizations have developed large language models internally on-prem to facilitate either contract development, analysis. So as you can see, everybody has a different point of view. And we generally think about IT projects in the concept of a use case, right? There is a use case because I want this output. And sometimes that can create frustration because you spend all this time, you invest all these resources, all of a sudden you're not getting the output you wanted. It's because you have to rethink what you're creating. What you're creating is a platform that, when given to individuals around the organization, you may find yourself with very different use cases that what you thought about at the beginning. And
Very
that's
interesting.
the
That's a very
magic of
interesting
AI.
point. Yep.
Yeah, that's the magic of AI. It creates opportunities you hadn't thought about from the beginning. And the other point I do want to bring, regarding the 80% failure, is trust. We have all seen ChatGPT output that have just made up things, right? This individual said so and so, such and such, but you have to understand, what is the technology? What is it doing? A large language model is, in its very basic form, is just anticipating the next word
Text. Yep.
based on how you've trained it and what it has been fed. So while something may sound like, that person, I can see that person saying that, but not necessarily true. It is getting a bad rap because everybody thinks, well, it's just going to give me fictitious stuff, right? So this is where we need to understand, just like any other tool, just like Excel, right? Excel is very powerful, has many different formulas, but if you use it incorrectly, it's just not going to be very beneficial to you, and it's going to give you it's going to give you an error. All right, a circular reference. So the same thing with large language models. If we understand what the technology does, then we know that there needs to be human intervention in order to um, make sure there's integrity in the output. Somebody that is knowledgeable about the output needs to review it and make sure that you're not getting fictitious data. You're getting data that is reliable and makes sense. And at the end of the day, what a large language model is just trying to do is trying to summarize large data sets. And that's where the benefit comes from.
Basically, if you apply it in a situation where, you brought up data. Data is a huge thing. It's as remember our friend Andrew at Avex Aerospace during our webinar. He said I had to get way out in front of the data because the data, data migration, data cleansing. And it's interesting. It's going to, in a way, it's ironic that AI operating on bad data will produce all kinds of bad results. And you can also use AI to clean up your data, to feed AI if you do it properly, right? And it can also make inferences or point out anomalies. Let's say, you brought up the issue of contract. There's contract pricing considerations and the ability to be nimble. You've got a a tariff that goes up in one country, and then all of a sudden they're sending it to the other country, and reprice your whole price list changes because that, you know, that's an input to many different things. It's imperative that systems employ AI and also employ uh, a data store that also has procedures and workflows that are very proactive in the way they work, right? And they can assess capacities, and they can assess what the sourcing should be, from what country, from what supplier, have ways to change pricing easily, have ways to reprice sales prices as a result, cost plus fixed price contracts, changing that. I mean, there's so many different variables that almost if you're operating without AI at this point, it's almost impossible. I mean, you can't do things with spreadsheets anymore. And there are so many companies, going back to my point about whether you do a standalone AI project versus an upgrade of your core systems. If you're using spreadsheets today to make decisions, like you said, and gathering data into spreadsheets to make decisions, you're toast in today's environment. You just can't do it. I mean, it just, there's too many changes and supply chain disruptions and things going on. So I think it's really going to be interesting to see. I think only in the next 6 months or so, you're going to see major changes in how these core systems work, and I don't see AI replacing these systems, because I think they're necessary for transactional purposes, and they're very good at what they do, that they don't go away, but yet they become very enhanced with things that require handling change and flexibility, as you said, being agile in a supply chain, for instance, particularly in manufacturing companies. I mean, I see it as manufacturers that are also government contractors, right? They're building components for defense systems. Those people have to be more agile than any other company, because they're dealing with all the regulations, they're dealing with compliance issues, and add to them all these supply chain disruptions, which any company is having. It gets very interesting to see how our systems are going to handle these.
I'm glad you brought, tariffs. Whenever I'm asked, can you tell me one of a word that can describe the current aerospace and defense environment? And that's uncertainty, right? There's so much uncertainty.
There's other words, but there's certainly
Yeah,
uncertainty.
that's uncertain. But really, the role of supply chain leaders, engineers, it's incredible how flexible they have been to adjust to different environments. So let's think about this. I always like to say, I need to understand the history in order to first not repeat it and understand how we got here, right?
Yeah.
We just, 20 years ago, even 25 years ago, there was a concept of hyper globalization. Let's get components and subcomponents at the lowest cost possible, and there's a little bit of that still, but everything got shifted to China, right? In some of the Asian countries. So in other countries around the world. So it was all about the lowest possible price. Now, then we started getting into issues like non-conforming parts, espionage, we got counterfeit electronic parts. So there was a refocus to say, let's do some reshoring, some friendshoring. Let's bring our supply chains closer. So now you're thinking, you're putting yourself in the shoes of a supply chain leader, and okay, now I got to rethink my plan. Whoever the suppliers I can work with, how can I still get enough competition so I can get decent prices out of the market? And now we're going one step further, and we are in an age of protectionism. We're bringing not only reshoring, but really getting it domestically inside the United States. And we're seeing some regulations like, the Buy American Act, increasing domestic content production. So now we got to rethink that plan again. And the ability to analyze your supply chain in order to maintain resilience, there's a concept of combat fragility, right? Keep that resilience against all these different shifts in supply chain environment is a lot, and we can't do it without technology. Technology is going to help us redefine how those supply chains can still abide by our domestic content, abide by DFARS business systems rule, and still maintain the integrity and price necessary to be competitive in the marketplace.
Unlock better leads through Solutions Review events.
Welcome to Data Demo Day. Expert Roundtable, Solution Spotlight featuring Monte Carlo, Cohesity, Denodo, Cloudflare, High Gear, Broadcom, Next Thing.
Boost your brand with a webinar that shares comprehensive use cases, real-time product demos, and an interactive Q&A. All broadcast live to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Zoom from our Boston studio, or even on location. Fill your sales funnel with high-quality targeted leads. And contact us today by visiting solutionsreview.com/virtual events.
That pricing is a monster right there. The cost and what types of contracts and all of that sort of thing. It seems that the solutions which have that kind of out of the box in a way, are delivering those kinds of things, and along with the Gov Cloud and all of that, gives companies a huge advantage in that area. And that's what AVEX did. They implemented that vertical industry solution for aerospace and defense. And I think it's enabled them to be very agile. And they also they did it in 6 months, which it's absolutely blew me away. I mean, with my experience at 25 years or so, I've only seen that a handful of times with that scale and that scope that they had. And they had other things, UKG, they had a bunch of these different products and things. And I touched on this a little bit in our webinar, but it's just a really impressive thing. And the tools that they have available are really making things a lot easier, so that at least you get your transactional stuff down and you get your maybe some RPA enabled sessions and things like that, and some workflows in place and some good reporting in place. It's relatively easy to do. And then you worry about the standalone AI projects, I think.
There's something you said I want to pull the thread on. Buyers are also becoming better informed, and they're asking the right questions, which I completely encourage, and for anybody watching this, whenever you go through a system selection process, whenever you're looking at transforming your business through tech enablement, make sure you ask your vendor, is your solution hosted in the Gov Cloud, first of all, right? And if you're handling CUI data, ITER data, that's a must.
You had to,
right?
It's a requirement. It's not an option.
Table stakes, right? That's
table stakes.
Like, that's when you start. And believe it or not, I still see every now and then, unfortunately, some errors that were made during the system selection process, and ERPs were chosen that cannot be hosted in the Gov Cloud. So either on-prem, or at some point they're going to have to switch again, right? So, in which we all know is very costly. The other one is, especially in aerospace and defense manufacturing, does it have, on one hand, the manufacturing, was it built for manufacturing? Does it have a product life cycle? How strong and robust is the inventory management? Does it have a manufacturing engineering system, etc.? On the other hand, was it built for the defense industry, right? So those are the two main elements of an ERP that is right for aerospace and defense manufacturing. And what do I mean with, was it built for the defense market? Can it achieve total time accounting? Does it has
Well,
does it have adequate project costing? So in terms of project costing, we all know that businesses realign their cost structure every 5 to 8 years, unless there has been a significant non-organic growth pattern, which may speed things up in terms of that
like an
restructuring.
acquisition or something.
And some ERPs, in order for you to redo the cost structure, you need to re-implement the entire ERP.
Oh,
That's very costly. Again, that's time, effort, and those are good questions you need to ask. Make informed decisions. Ask your vendor, do you provide this? Do you do this? The last point I'll make is, um, sometimes I get customers that choose an ERP solution, and from a training and adoption, from an organizational change management, the question is asked is, well, do you have manuals of the technology? Yeah, we have this entire library of manuals, but that's not training and adoption. I mean, training and adoption is much more than that. Training and adoption is selling the transformation to your organization, highlighting why it is important and how it's going to benefit everyone in your organization. And then at the end of the day, is making sure everyone is using the technology the right way it's supposed to be, right? Is it supposed to be used? And that's the key, right? Trying to achieve that technology promise, that thesis for the transformation, realizing it by making sure that everyone understands how to use the technology properly. I have a story, not a story, but analogy I like to tell in terms of user and adoption. We have all been in a very nice, fancy restaurant with chandeliers, and you can tell that the owner has spent a lot of money on it. You go to wash your hands, and you see this really fancy automated soap dispenser. All of a sudden, there's no soap. But instead, what you have is a $1 bottle that was probably bought from the nearest CVS, and that's what you got to use. What happened there? The staff that was supposed to replace the soap was not trained to actually use it and do it the right way. So they said, you know what? We're just going to put a $1 bottle there. Yeah, who cares, right? So that's exactly what happens in organizations. If individuals, if employees do not understand how to use the technology, they're going to revert back to what's easiest and what they know most. Excel spreadsheets, manual processes, and then there's not going to be a good use of all the investment their companies have made in technology.
yeah, we used to call that a workaround.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a great anecdote, or like you said, not anecdote, analogy. Although I think probably everybody has that detail in an anecdote somewhere. I know I've experienced the soap thing, and have had that thought. It's like, well, why isn't it cheaper? Isn't it more cost effective? You get buy the large industrial amounts of soap rather than the retail one. But yeah, it's implementation problems. It's inexperience.
Or did I pay too much for
Yeah.
this hotel?
Fair
Yeah,
enough.
I've had the
Yeah,
thoughts, oh,
that
maybe
is
it's just somebody's preference. Oh, they like the apple smell that this one has. And then, you mentioned Excel too. And the first time it came up when I was listening, I had the thought, I was like, I wonder if Excel is the most reference, despite not being ERP software, although it kind of is sometimes. Yeah,
Most popular
it's probably
ERP in the world.
The most
Excel.
referenced piece of software on this show, more than SAP, Infor, BDO, anything like that. Excel comes up the most because, yeah, like the soap, it touches so many lives. Even though maybe it's not time to let go of soap, but maybe it's time to let go of Excel a little bit. Luis, thank you so much for coming on Evolving ERP and sharing your knowledge. We haven't had anybody on from your area of expertise, so it's always great to have people from different industries, from different expertises, come in and share this, because ERP does seem to be the hub around which everything spokes out in industry. So, and Dan, of course, thank you for bringing Luis on and leading that conversation.
Sure.
That was excellent.
Thanks for coming on, Luis.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ryan and Dan. I really appreciate the opportunity. Always happy to chat about aerospace and defense and technology.
So, Luis, where should people look for you, for what you're doing, for what BDO is doing?
Yes. Please visit us at bdo.com. We have an operational excellence practice where we host technology and transformation services and solutions, in addition to functional and operational solutions like supply chain. We're also, we attend a lot of aerospace and defense events. So I'm sure if you attend those events, we'll see you around.
Yeah, well, perfect opportunity, like you mentioned before, to get out there in person. Now that you have AI taking some of the workload off your plate,
There you go.
go to a trade show, go see Luis. There you go.
There you go.
Dan, how about you? Where should people look for you and what you're doing?
Probably the best place for me is LinkedIn, and I am at pcgservices.com, which is our main website. And we have another one. I mentioned the Smart Factory solution. It's called A Smart Factory, all one word, .com.
All right, asmartfactory.com. And all of those will be down in the show notes, the description below. And of course, hey, while you're down there, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You want to get notified when the next episode of Evolving ERP comes out, and all the episodes of all the great content we have here on the Inside Gem YouTube channel, whether it's ERP, cybersecurity, basically all things AI at this point. We're talking it, and it's coming out here on the Inside Gem channel. So do check that out. Hit that subscribe button. And if you like the show, don't keep that to yourself. Show it. Hit that like button. Let us know down in the comments if you liked it too. So, like I said, now that you've hit subscribe, you'll know about the next Evolving ERP, which is when I will see you next. And perhaps Dan and Luis as well. So for Dan and Luis, I've been your host, Ryan Daly. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Powered by Insight Jam.